We're here. We're live for the Week 10 edition of our Q&A from OccupyFantasy.com. I'm Moose at CFB_Moose on Twitter is where you can find me. I'm the co-host here and co-founder and data guru here at Occupy Fantasy alongside Brian Jester FF at Brian Jester FF on Twitter. He's the co-founder and CEO of Occupy Fantasy. How's it going, Brian?
What is up, Moose? Glad to have you back. You were didn't join us for the Saturday show last week, but you and I we chatted on Tuesday for the $1 Million Mission. So glad to have you back and talk about some NFL on a Saturday.
Definitely, and I'm just going to point this out. I got some limeade from the store because it was on sale, and it's pretty bad. So not a good way to start the show. So I will be transitioning to water halfway through the show. I'm done with this cup.
There's nothing when you get bad juice like that, or fake, or drink.
Yeah.
If you're Chappelle, right? Some green drink, it'll upset your stomach pretty quickly. So.
Yeah, and it just simmered in my mouth, and every time I talk, I can just taste it. It's bad. But hey, we're not here to talk about bad juices. We're here to talk about bad plays. And great transition. Great transition. And but yeah, we're here to talk about some answer your questions about FanDuel, DraftKings, Yahoo for the NFL DFS slate tomorrow. Really quick, first question here from David in the chat says, do you guys have any apprehension about playing Cook this week with all his off-field drama? Not sure in cash if I should stay with him or pivot to Zeke.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to affect his playing time this week, right? It honestly probably won't affect his playing time this season. So unless you're playing armchair psychologist, I wouldn't let that story impact your decision to play Dalvin this week.
Makes sense to me. Yeah, and he's pretty high up there in the model. I was just trying to look here. Yeah, he's top 6, I think. So, while we're on the subject of running backs, Brian, it seems like we can finally play running backs that are over 10%. It seems like there's a handful of them over 15 projected ownership, a couple over 20. What's your take on that?
I'm pumped. I'm so excited. If you figure the last time we had these super cheap, high volume running backs, it was spike week in week 3, at least for me. And I know a lot of our members did well that week. That was Alexander Matt's season. So I think everyone was happy with that. And generally, a lot of my big hits have come on weeks like this just because it makes lineup building that much easier. I actually called my shot on the Roto Grinders podcast yesterday, and I think this is going to be a spike week for me just because of we get the cheap running backs, we get the game stacks we like, and then as I texted you this morning, I was building my lineups and everything just fell into place perfectly. So it all starts with those cheap running backs, and the cover boy of the plug this week, Dearness Johnson. We saw what he can do when Kareem and Nick Chubb were out in that Thursday night matchup. Just an incredible offensive line and running game and running scheme. He's going to slot right in. Way too cheap on both sites. And he would be a lock button running back this week if we didn't have some other guys on the slate that are kind of in a similar price range that are thrusting the starting roles.
Yeah, and the biggest thing about Dearness Johnson is he's actually good, too. He's a really good running back. So that's always good to put him in that way. And that's why he's the most popular. He's projected to be the most popular running back on the slate tomorrow. Over 30% on both sites. Question here from Hawk Dark says, what's your thoughts on Melvin Gordon? Brian, I don't know about you. I don't necessarily like him too much in sense of there's so many other good plays.
Yeah, he's not a guy you have to play, right? For me, it's either you play these 2 to 3 super cheap, amazing, popular plays, or you play the studs with that are a little bit higher up. I just don't think there's a need to play someone like him this week. Sure, can he score 2 touchdowns? Sure, can he get 100 yards? Yeah, but he's way less likely than some of these other guys, and I think you're wasting some exposures if you're using it on guys that aren't those guys in that bottom range.
Yep, makes sense to me. So if we have some cheap running backs, that opens up potential for the chalk wide receivers that we talk about. Also some game stats. Yes. And just looking at the plug that was put up last night by our NFL writer Chris Rooney, game stacks are also good this week. We also are actually playing good teams in game stacks. So maybe it's just me, but it feels like like you said this morning, everything's kind of just piecing together. The puzzle pieces are just working perfectly.
I would be absolutely shocked if we don't see pros win GPPs tomorrow, right? It's lined up too perfectly. Have a feeling we're going to do really well here at Occupy, so I'm excited. And Dot bets in the question. Dot Bets in the chat asked, lock button Dearness, tons of other exposures to Ingram and Bolden. And yeah, so those are the two other guys, right? If Kamara played, right, and it was just Dearness and maybe Bolden, I would lock button Dearness Johnson. And if you're playing 3 lineups, 10 lineups, yeah, you can still probably lock button Dearness. If you're playing 20 or 150, there's enough reason to play Ingram or Bolden at their prices that you can't lock button Dearness. But so just those two guys, right? So Kamara is out. Ingram, ever since he got traded back to New Orleans a couple weeks ago, has had a pretty significant role in the run game and the pass game. I think more than everyone expected with Kamara there. Now with Kamara out, in an offense that feeds running backs receptions more than any other offense in the history of the NFL over the last 10 years, Ingram's in a fantastic spot. And then you have Bolden, Ramondre Stevenson, Damian Harris likely out for New England. Bolden, we know, is going to get the passing game work, Moose. J.J. Taylor is going to mix in as well. The big question there is we don't know how that running game is going to be split.
No, but the upside is there. In addition, like you said, he has the passing game as well. If he gets a couple passes, that can get him the value there. And let's see, how cheap is he? Where is he? Oh God, I can't find him.
Bolden's like 44 on DraftKings, right?
Yeah, under 5. So, or you could just take the amazing approach and just lock button all 3 of them.
Just triple cheap running back and then go from there. But the issue with that is, and I think it's an amazing move, is there are guys at the top that we like too. Najee, Austin Eckler, Dalvin Cook, Zeke, Jonathan Taylor, Swift, like all these amazing running back plays this week.
Yeah, and this is actually what we've been used to in years prior. We were just talking about it before the show. This seems like a traditional, pre-2021 slate where you have, you would play the high-owned running backs. So I'm really curious about that. David says, why was Green Bay, Seattle #1 in the plug? I'm assuming both great quarterback plays. Seems like the hive mind is heavy stacking Atlanta, Dallas.
And as they should, right? Game total 55, it's moved up a little bit. Chris, when he writes the plug, one of the big considerations he uses, and it's something we use as well, obviously, is ceiling performance by individual players and what that looks like in a game environment. So anytime you have Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf in the same game, that's going to pop. And that game's going to go way overlooked. I'm a little concerned about the pace, and that weather could be a little interesting tomorrow. It's right on that threshold of 15 miles per hour winds, some rain introduced. Let's monitor and see if the total drops. If that does, we'll probably remove that from the plug. Mm-hmm. But again, you have 4 high ceiling guys in that game, and that that always makes for a stacking environment. Even if you don't want to fully stack in Moose, you could always mini stack it with 2 receivers or something.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm looking here in the model, and Devontae Adams projected for over 10 targets. Literally the only wide receiver this slate to do that. DJ Metcalf, he's air yard fiend. Tyler Lockett, same thing. So the upside is definitely there in that game. But yeah, so let's talk about the other one that he mentioned is the Atlanta-Dallas game. Probably, like he said, one of the first games that came to mind that pops out for me, where I'm definitely going to be stacking this game. I want to ask you a question, Brian. How are you handling Cordell Patterson, where before he's been kind of that cheap play, but now that we have so many other cheap plays now, are you fitting him in outside of your game stacks, or how are you handling him?
Yeah, so his price is actually up more than I expected this week, and I didn't even realize until I started building. I was like, wait, he's a little bit more, he's pricier than usual. So I included him in my player pool, but I don't have much outside of game stacks, admittedly.
Makes sense. All right, cool. So we got some questions here. Do we flex the running back position in 20 max with these cheap running back options?
See, that's the thing, right? You can, and you should. But we have 6 underperforming wide receivers. The game stacks are filled with great receivers. I would just be flexible. I would be flexible. I wouldn't force it. Let the builder or your hands, if you're building by hand, do what you want. I don't think you have to force one position or the other because we have so many different options this week.
Yep, makes sense to me. How do you guys feel about a Wentz-Pittman stack and bringing it back with Arnold?
If you're going for the 2x1, smaller field, obviously. Pittman's getting tons of targets and opportunity this year, and Indy has a 29-point team total, I think, now, and Dan Arnold's one of our top tight ends, somehow leading that team in targets over the last couple of weeks. So yeah, I'm on board with it.
Yeah, and again, you gotta play one tight end no matter what. So I don't hate
Yeah,
that at all. No.
exactly.
Yep. Thoughts on playing two cheap running backs and an expensive one at the flex? I don't.
Yeah, that's probably the optimal way to go. Play two of those three cheap guys and then one of these studs. And I think that's if you're playing three running backs, that's probably the best balance, I would say.
Definitely. Yep. Cool. So great questions so far. Again, we're here until 2:30 answering your questions, talking about game stacks, talking about the upcoming slate. One position we haven't talked too much about is that running as the wide receiver. Excuse me. So with all these cheap running backs, it does offer up our ability to play our chalk wide receivers. And I'm just sorting by DraftKings ownership. Devontae Adams, Keenan Allen, Jarvis Landry, Deontay Johnson, Jacoby Myers are the top 5 projected on DraftKings. How are you handling the chalk wide receivers this week, Brian?
Yeah, I'm trying to match as much as I can, if not go over, because we, like you said, you talked about in the model, Devontae Adams, only receiver we project for 10 or more targets. I'm sure another receiver will get there, but he has the highest target projection on the slate. Deontay Johnson without Juju, now without Claypool, he's huge there. Jarvis Landry, no OBJ. They haven't passed a ton recently, but the target share has been nuts for Landry. Jacoby Myers, underperforming wide receiver this week. And I think I missed one more, right? Keenan Allen in a game stack that we like. So yeah, I think try to get as close as to those guys as you can, their ownership, and go over if you can.
Yeah, and I've always thought about this. So let's say for like Devontae Adams or something like that. If you're playing that game stack, I'm saying you're going 20, 150, whatever. How are you handling your roster percentage of him within game stacks and as a one-off as well?
Yeah, it's something I've tried to consciously be aware of recently is that dilemma, because if you game stack Devontae Adams and you're playing both sides or one side, you're going to get like 20% exposure, right? Which means you're basically matching the field on Adams in your lineup set, but all of those are in game stacks, which is a great way to get leverage on Adams. But if chalk wide receivers is the new meta and we want to play him outside of game stacks as well, you have to manually bump up that exposure. Maybe get 30%, hell, maybe 40%, right? Like you want some exposure to add with Adams to other quarterbacks as well. So it's something you have to consciously think about doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense to me. And kind of what I've done is I've actually had to take a look back and do some of my own analysis and say what lineups outside of my game stack is this wide receiver in, and does it make sense in that lineup? So it takes a little bit more time, but I feel good about the process.
Yeah, and it's taking extra time is never a bad thing, right? It's actually, most of the time when you take extra time, it actually does help your lineup. So go figure.
Yeah, who knew? The more time you spend. Let's see. 1x1 Bolden to Ernest stack with a 3x1 stack seems, I guess, good. Kind of like mix and shove games last week. Do you like that?
Yeah, I'd like the question. I like the idea. I hate the reference to the game that the 1x1 I faded last week. So, but yeah, I think that could totally make sense, right?
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, I also didn't like that because I had the wrong players from both sides.
I know. I hear you, Melissa.
Yep. Fast says I feel like Ingram will be a trap play in the same way we saw Swift a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, potentially, but I also don't think we'll see Ingram get too high just because of the presence of Dearness Johnson. So I don't think he'll be over-owned in any stretch. Like, who else are they going to give the ball to, right? Yeah. Like, if you know someone else in that backfield, feel free to name him in the chat, right? Like, it's that bad. So he's going to get goal line work and receiving work at $4,500. Like, it's not much, or however much he is. There's not much else you can, what else could you want?
Yeah, I still wish I had that chart that showed us like how much, like what percent does a team pass when they should pass, and the Saints are like at the very bottom. It's like they just always run.
Yes, they're literally near the bottom. So running, and when they do pass, they don't have any receivers. They're throwing to the running backs anyways. That's been their whole, that's been their thing since Sean Payton's been there. So can he fail? Yes, absolutely. But he's in an amazing spot.
Definitely. What's up, Ed? He says I'm doing a satellite for the 555 milli ticket with 3-1. How crazy do I need to get, or how safe should I be? I was looking at 3-1 Minnesota Chargers or Indy Jacks. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so Moose, if I'm not mistaken, right? If I imagine that type of contest. Ed, let us know if this is wrong, but I imagine that type of contest is 200 players or less. Mm-hmm. And Moose, just using the charts we used in the Millie Mission a couple weeks ago, I would say a 2x1 may even be better for that type of contest if you're specifically building a lineup for that contest. So I would say 2x1 and you don't have to get crazy whatsoever.
Yeah, I would say it's 2x1, just because you want to get. You figure if you're doing in. Yeah, I would say for both teams, you want to just figure out who gets the most scoring. And this might sound, I'm trying to word it a right way. You want the people who's going to get the most target share, who's going to have the not necessarily the highest ceiling, but the highest percent chance to get there for you. Because you don't need to beat out 250,000 people and get the optimal lineup. You just need to beat the 200 people. What's the probability that these players are going to get you there?
Yeah, and he has 31 players. I would definitely stick to just 2x1 stack in there.
Absolutely 2x1 stack there. Yeah, and then just fill in with a bunch of studs from the model, and you'll be fine.
Or 2-0 even. We've seen that be positive leverage in that contest size too. So I think I would stick with 2 offensive players, maybe 1 from the opposing team. A little bit different than our normal strategy though.
Yep. Let's see here. Opinion on James Washington?
I think he's a cheap option, right? Unfortunately, it's not preseason, which means he probably won't score a touchdown, which is where James Washington scores all of his touchdowns. But again, going to be the number 2 receiver without Claypool. Attention should be focused on Deontay Johnson. Washington's definitely one of the cheaper, good wide receivers to use this week.
Yeah, only 3,500 on DraftKings can definitely be a good spot to help you fit in if you do a bunch of expensive stuff.
Yep, exactly.
Definitely. Is it okay to play Ingram against the same defense in the same lineup?
There's just no reason to do it, right? 11 games on the slate, like there's never a reason to do that in any main slate 11 game format. Shorter slate, sure. Showdown, obviously, yes. 11 games is you can find somewhere else to make that not work.
Yeah, I mean we saw it work in Showdown.
Yeah, Showdown, completely different story. Main slate, like there's why force that anti-correlation?
Exactly, yeah. Terry McLaurin and CPAT for DJ Moore and Saquon. Who wins?
Give me the side that doesn't have an injured player, so I'll go Terry and CPAT.
Cool. Javonte Williams or Van Jefferson or McKissick?
Now he's asking all kinds. Russell Cage, that sounds like a Mortal Kombat fighter. Monir, let us know is that season long DFS contest type. Let us give us some more context. We'll happily answer it for you.
Definitely. Let's see. So, and then if we talk about the last slate, or the last game stack that Chris brought up, Minnesota at the Chargers, which Ed already talked about a little bit as a potential thing. It's weird. High team total. You got Dalvin Cook, Austin Eckler. You got a bunch of good spots there. I almost feel like this might be one of the better. Like this would probably be my number 2 stack for me. But I'm curious to pick your brain about this one.
Yeah, definitely my number 2 as well. Total's gone up a little bit. I know the total's gone up 1.5 points in this game, so I think the highest increase of the week. So we definitely like that. And again, tons of ceiling opportunities here. Got a couple cheap options in Conklin, the tight end position, who we like. Jared Cook on the other side. KJ Osborne. So definitely cheap options to fit in. And even so, we have enough value everywhere that we don't necessarily have to get a cheap piece into our lineup this week. But yeah, I would say that's definitely the number 2 game stack for me.
The only thing that is a little tricky for me, and kind of same scenario with the Seattle side, is there's so many good players that you can pick from. It's almost hard to pick the right one.
Yeah, for one lineup, it's super tough, right? Like, how do you figure that out? It definitely makes it difficult. Definitely one of the better MME game stacks, I would say.
Definitely. Are there any game stacks that you're lower on compared to the rest of the field?
No, I think the field's on the Atlanta-Dallas game. I'm appropriately on that one. No, I don't think so. We already talked about maybe some of the downsides to that Green Bay-Seattle game. I like the Tampa Bay game a lot, and that spread is now below double digits, which means it's firmly in 3x1 stacking territory. So I definitely like the Tom Brady side, and I think you can even get kind of crazy and play Taylor Heineke stacks too.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Well, so you figure, right? The thing is, we have concentrated volume. Terry McLaurin, Ricky Seals-Jones, McKissick out of the backfield.
Yeah.
And it's super cheap. You could even 2x1 if you want, because Heineke can run some. So I actually like that game stack a lot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just so tough. It's just like bias that we've gotten everything wrong on Washington, on everything we've ever done.
Time to turn it around. Second half of the season's here. It's time to turn it around.
Exactly. Yep. Definitely. Let's see. Thoughts on Connor paired with Arizona defense?
Yeah, love it.
Yep.
I think it's a great pairing.
Dot says, is this a min one underperforming wide receiver this week?
I think we're close. Some of the games, I wouldn't force it though. I would just manually set exposures because there are some lineups, obviously, because Devontae Adams is chalky, but not an underperforming wide receiver. We got all these cheap running backs. I wouldn't necessarily force it, but I would try to get as many as I can in there, if that makes sense.
Yep. Cousins has scored 20-plus points every road game, and Thielen scores more in road games than Jefferson.
Yeah, we're talking about a sample size of 4 games here, so it's definitely tough to figure out. Yeah, for sure.
And as Ken says, the $1 million question, DK or Lockett?
Yeah, dude, flip a coin. I will say Lockett, but...
Which means DK is getting 3.
Yeah, so take DK.
Yeah. Davis has a qualifier adds 42 players. First gets the WFFC ticket. All pros in these 2x1.
Yeah, I think same concept applies. I would 2x1. We saw that pros aren't 2x1 stacking as much as they should. They're actually overplaying the 3x1 stack just based on the 9 weeks of data we've seen so far. And again, there's no downside to playing the 2x1, right? Like you're still getting massive correlation. Mm-hmm. Only 40 players. No true downside. So I would say, to be ahead of the curve, play 2x1 in that size field.
Yep. I will say the only thing not to do is those rare 8x0 stacks that you see like 3 people do in the Millionaire Maker every week.
Do not play 8x0 stack. There is downside to that.
Yep. Hawk Dark says the Myers touchdown week.
Dude, it's got to be soon, right? Like eventually we got to be right? Yeah. Like the clock's right twice a day or some shit. Like it's got to be a broken clock's right twice a day. Like it's eventually got to happen.
Yeah.
But he's underperforming this week, so I think this might be it.
Nice. Matthew says your favorite wide receiver this week on FanDuel.
Very good question. I'm just looking at the model really quickly. AJ Brown's our top option. But for me, it's either Devontae Adams or I think CD Lamb's probably my favorite.
Oh, fancy.
Because the game total is 55 points, but we got his projected ownership at 5%. So, and he's underperforming wide receiver. So I think CD Lamb's definitely the answer to that question.
Wow, nice. Wasn't expecting you to go that far down in the model, but hey,
we get an underperforming wide receiver in the highest total of the week on one of the highest team totals at 5%. Sign me up.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Tampa Bay Curtis Samuel equals Tyler Johnson or Gio. Lots to talk about Johnson.
Yeah, generally we only see Gio when they're trailing. I don't expect to see them trailing the second half against Washington. And Tyler Johnson. So we haven't really talked about it yet, but Chris Godwin's officially questionable. Game time decision, I think he plays, but if he does play, he's only practiced in limited fashion once over the last 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Decent chance he's limited. Tyler Johnson at worst is going to be the wide receiver 3, at most can be the wide receiver 2. Mad cheap. And he's actually good. Like he's a good player. So yeah, I think he's a great Curtis Samuel piece in that Tampa Bay game stack.
Nice. Cool. So here for 5 more minutes or so. We haven't really talked too much about that. Could you the Tampa Bay side? I feel like that could be a sneaky stat. More that I think about it, I think you could play it 3x1 with Heineke.
You can, right?
Especially if Chris Godwin's out, and there's going to be concentrated volume on the Tampa Bay side. I think that's definitely one of those you got to wait until inactives come out.
I think so, or if we get some word today at 4:00 that Godwin's not going to travel or whatever. So, but yeah, I mean, if you think about it from the side, it's super cheap, right? You play Heineke, obviously Terry McLaurin, underperforming wide receiver with him, and then either Ricky Seals-Jones or McKissick, both guys who can give volume. And McKissick, we expect in this expected game script to get more work than Gibson. And then you run it back with Mike Evans or Fournette or Godwin if he plays or Tyler Johnson. Like so many options. So I think it can definitely get there.
Yeah, definitely. Ed, I'm not even going to answer your question. Feinstein says, favorite tight end to playoff game stacks on FanDuel.
Like in-game stacks? I think clarify the question. Like inside of game stacks or outside of game stacks?
Okay. Yeah, I thought he meant like outside of game stacks.
I thought he meant in-game stacks. Let's get the clarification from L. Feinstein, and then we'll happily answer it.
Definitely. I guess we have to answer the question now since there's no more. It is never Taysom Hill season.
He actually might steal some work, I guess, though, to that point, right? Like that's how Ingram could fail, is if Taysom gets some bullshit goal line work. So Yeah, that could definitely happen. I don't know if we're gonna play taste him, but you
Yeah,
could definitely steal some.
definitely. He says outside of game stacks.
Got you. Outside of game stacks. For me on FanDuel, so I'm just looking. If you're not, I mean, Kyle Pitts obviously, I think is the top one. We like Conklin a lot this week, but I think the one that if you're not looking at the game stacks in the plug, I like Hawkinson this week. Um, we have him 2% projected on both sites. Obviously has an insane ceiling in that offense. So yeah, I'll say TJ Hawkinson.
I was gonna say that, or like I say Pitts. They're the only two tight ends projected to have over 7 targets. Everyone else
Yep.
is below 6, so the little gap there. Yeah, Hawk's a good one there for me. Cool. Let's see. Nathan says, "Do I trade away Zeke, Kamara, and D Hop for Justin Jefferson and Swift?"
Ooh, that's damn, that's a blockbuster. Jesus Christ, man. I don't think I would. That's wild. Give me a second to think about it. I don't know. That's really tough.
Definitely. David says, "Awesome stream, guys. Moose, did you get any Horton's coffee or Long John Silver's at the live final?" I did get some Horton's coffee. It's coffee, and no Long John Silver's. I'm a Mid-Atlantic boy, so I actually only eat good seafood.
There you go.
Yeah. Ed says, "Who are you playing that we shouldn't?"
Uh, you know what? This is a question that I'm gonna just reinterpret myself, and who's a player that you're playing that the field isn't that we should? A little bit different. It's Christian McCaffrey, right? We have him projected for 3% on DraftKings, 2% on FanDuel. Last week he had 14 PPR points, played limited, less than he normally plays. Off the injury report completely, left that game unscathed. So we should have full go number 1 overall pick in season on Christian McCaffrey on Sunday. And we get him at 8,400 DraftKings, $1,600 cheaper than his peak so far this year. 9K on FanDuel, like 2K cheaper than his peak, and he's less than 5%. Like, if you're playing lineups, you gotta get some McCaffrey exposure. He could be that. I know we talk about all this value and stuff, and McCaffrey could score 40 and break the slate.
Yeah, and that's one of those ones where you can play a Darnus and McCaffrey, and you're okay because you save so much on the other running back.
Yes, exactly. And that answers Bet's question. Who's your favorite expensive running back this week? Is 100% McCaffrey. And he's not going to rank that highly in the model just because of his workload lately.
Yeah.
But if you take that leap of faith that his workload goes back to its normal levels tomorrow, I mean, it's one of those situations where you'll look back on Monday morning like, holy shit, I can't believe we didn't play him at 3%.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's gonna be like, oh god, of course the pro who locked McCaffrey.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Like, if you're playing 10 lineups, you put him in 2 lineups, that's 20%. You're 10 times the field, which is insanity to think about.
Exactly. Yeah. There's probably not going to be another time this season where you can have a full McCaffrey, like fully healthy McCaffrey, and get 10x leverage easily.
Right. Like, we had that situation with Dalvin Cook, but he was still had high ankle sprain. Right. Nothing's wrong with McCaffrey at this point. We get fully healthy McCaffrey. So, pretty wild if you just take a step back and look at it for a second.
Exactly. Yep. Definitely. So, so Nathan says his league is full PPR.
Okay. I'm gonna look it up right now. I'm gonna look at some rankings. Just hold tight for 1 minute until the end of the show, and I will answer that for you.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So while Brian's looking that up, the last thing I'll say is Chris will be live tomorrow at 11 a.m.
It's actually gonna be me. It's gonna be me.
Oh.
I'm filling in for Chris. Yeah.
Well, it'll be Brian, which means let's pray there's not no technical difficulties.
Very possible.
No, it seems like anytime there's a switch in anything, there's always some sort of technical difficulties.
Yes,
so,
very true.
Brian will be live tomorrow at 11 a.m. Then we'll go back again on Tuesday to review his lineups. And in the meantime, we still have the Discord that you can join, occupyfantasy.com/Discord.
Yes, and to answer the question, I looked it up. Generally, if you're getting the two side of a three versus 2 trade, it's generally pretty good. I don't think I would do it. I would hold Zeke, Kamara, and D-Hop.
Nice. Cool. So, before I take us out of here, Brian, any last words or anything?
Just Babe Ruth calling a shot this week. I'm pointing at the stands. This is the week. Tune back in Tuesday for a spike week. I'm calling it.
Nice. There we go. So, spike season.
Yes.
So, until next time, until Tuesday, where we review Brian's Spike Week. I am Moose, and he is Brian. We're from Occupy Fantasy. Have a good night.